Alright, so the next topic that we're going to be dealing with are the rules of replacement. The rules of replacement, and there are 10 in numbers, unlike the rule of inference, there are 9. And just like the way that I have my ways of remembering the rule of inference, I also have my ways of remembering the rule of replacement. So I call it MIT. C d raised to power 3. That is MIT C d raised to power 3. And I know that the MIT has double M. Then the T also has double T. Then there is C and there is D raised to power 3. So once I can remember MIT C D raised to power 3, automatically I know the rules of replacement. So let's quickly explain the rules before we bring out a question on how to apply the rules. The first one is material equivalence. We call it equiv. The next one is material implication. We call it imp. Then the E is exportation. We just call it EXP. The E is exportation, we call it EXP. The A is association, we call it ASSOC. Then the T is tautology, we call it TAUT. The second T is also TAUT. The second T is transposition, we call it trans. Then the C is commutation, we call it com. The first D is double negation, we call it DN. The next D is distribution, we call it dist. Then the last D is the Morgan theorem, then we call it DEN. The Morgan theorem. So I'm going to be writing out the rules one after the other, then I'll bring out an example on how to apply them. So to begin with, the first one, material equivalence, which is known as and don't forget that what we are trying to do with the rule of replacement is that if we have a given proposition that is like this, then we can replace it with another proposition. That's just what rule of replacement is talking about. Unlike the rule of inference that is saying that you can infer a particular conclusion from a given premise, but in a rule of replacement, we are replacing a statement, the whole of the statement, with another statement entirely. So that's what rule of replacement is saying. So material equivalence is saying that P if and only if Q. In other words, if you have P if and only if Q, you can replace it with, that is, if and only if P implies Q and Q implies P. Material equivalence is saying that if you have P if and only if Q, you can say if and only if, that is, you can replace it with Q P if and only, P implies Q and Q implies P. Then material equivalence actually have two different lines. That is, apart from this one, there's another possible way of making use of material equivalence. So in other words, if you have P if and only if Q, you can say if and only if P and Q, or negation P and negation Q. So what material equivalence is just saying is that if you have P if and only if Q, you can replace it with P implies Q and Q implies P. And you can also replace P if and only if Q with P and Q, or negation P and negation Q. Just like you can replace this one with this one, you can also replace this one with this one. Just like you can replace this one with this one, you can also replace this one with this one. So the next one is number 2, material implication. We call it imp. The other one is saying P implies Q if and only if P implies Q if and only if negation P or Q. What material implication is saying is that if you have P implies Q, you can replace it with negation P or Q. And don't forget that the way we explain rule of inference, that all this content does not matter. The content can change. What actually matters is the form. That is, if you have something like, let's say T implies R, you can replace it with, that is, if and only if you can replace it with negation T or R. It's still the same thing as using implication. So what the rule is just saying is that if you have this one, you can replace it with this, and if you also have this, you can replace it with this, and the same thing applies to the next one. So let's go to the next one is exportation. EXP. Then it's saying that P and Q in parentheses implies R if and only if P implies Q implies R. So what this particular one is saying is that if we have P and Q implies R, we can replace it with P implies Q implies R. It's just that in this place, the sign here is going to change to implication, and the parenthesis is going to move from P and Q to Q implies R. Then the next one is association. Yeah, that one, P or Q or R if and only if P or Q or R. Then the second line, P and Q and R if and only if P and Q and R. So what association is just saying is that if you have P or Q or R, that is, the parenthesis is there, you can replace it by bringing down the parenthesis to P or R or R. It's only just the parenthesis, the position that is changing. And then the same thing applies to this one too. If you have this statement, you can replace it with this particular one. So let's go to the next one. Tautology. Tautology is just saying P if and only if P and P, then P if and only if P or P. In other words, tautology is saying that we can replace P with P and P, and we can also replace P and P with P, and the same thing applies to this one. So we can replace P with P or P, and we can also replace P or P with P. Then the next one, transposition. P implies Q if and only if negation Q implies negation P. What transposition is just saying is that if you have P implies Q, you can replace it with negation Q implies negation P. So it remains the last four. Then the next one is double negation. DN, double negation DN. So that one is just saying that if you have P, you can replace it with if and only if negation P. In other words, if you have P, you can say if and only if negation P. And if you also have negation P, you can replace it with P. Then the next one is distribution. this. Then this one is saying that P or Q and R if and only if P or Q and P or R. In other words, we can replace P or Q and R with P or Q and P or R. If you should look at it very carefully, we are just distributing this P to the two of them. Then the P is actually going with the connective that is in front of it, while this one is the one that is serving as the major, what's it called, connective in between the two of them. So P and R, this P or we are distributing it for the two of them. That's how they call it, distribution. So P or Q, P or R, then we use this and to join them together in the middle. Then the second line, distribution also has a second line, P and Q or R if and only if P and Q or P and R. So the same thing occurs in this place too. We are just distributing this P and for the two of them. So that's P and Q or P and R. So what the rule of distribution is saying is that if you have this particular one, you can replace it with this, and if you have this, you can also replace it with this. So the last one now. The last one, the Morgan theorem. The Morgan's theorem. Which is the and it states that negation open bracket P and P and Q if and only if negation P or negation Q. The Morgan theorem is the only rule of replacement that you can use in changing and to or. So if you have negation P and Q together inside one parenthesis, then you can replace it with, which means if and only if, you can replace it with negation P, then you change the and, you change it to or, and or negation Q. So here we have negation P and Q together, if and only if, then we are replacing it with negation P or negation Q. That means you are distributing the negation for the two of them and you are changing the connective from and to or. Then the same thing applies to the second line. So it has two lines, negation P or Q if and only if negation P and negation Q. So that's the second line. We are just changing the connective. So this one is saying that if you have negation P or Q together in parentheses, you can replace it with negation P and negation Q. So those are the those are the 10 different rules of replacement that we are having. So let's have one example to practice how to apply those rules. But one thing is that in rule of inference, when we do rule of inference, we are only applying the 9 rules of inference. But if we want to solve example on rule of replacement, then we have to be applying all the 19 rules. So we have to bear all the 19 rules in our mind as we are trying to solve the rule of replacement. So let us assume that we have a question like this, line 1, after symbolizing negation N and B implies negation F, then our line 2, open parenthesis, F implies B, close parenthesis, implies E, then line 3, negation N, then our conclusion is E. So let us assume this is our question now. What are we going to do and how are we going to resolve it? Don't forget that when we are applying the rule of replacement, we also bear the rule of inference in mind. So we are going to be using all the whole 19 rules to solve this question. However, there is no any strict rule that says that you have to do number 1 first or you have to do number 2 first. All you just have to do is to keep applying the rule until you get to the conclusion. If you have to, or if it takes you to do number 2 or number 3 or number 1, anyhow it goes, just make sure that you keep applying the rule until you get to the conclusion where you are going to stop. And like I also said in rule of inference, if you want to apply the rules of replacement to using the rule of inference as well, you have to first of all look at your conclusion. That is, this is my conclusion. How am I going to bring out this conclusion? That's going to be our major concern. That is, how are we bringing out this particular conclusion? Then the first thing that we might probably want to look at is that if we have this F implies B, if we have this F implies B, then we have E here. If we have F implies B to stay on its own, then we can say not line 2 and that F implies B using modus ponens to bring out E. That is, P implies Q, P, which is F implies B, therefore Q. So all I'm just going to be doing now is to manipulate this argument until I get to F implies B. Once I get to F implies B, then I'll use modus ponens with this particular one to get the E. So let me say line 4, negation N, negation N or B. I'll now say 3, addition. Don't forget that the rule of addition says that P, therefore P or Q. This is my P, so therefore P, which is negation N, or Q, which is B. So 3, addition. Then line 5, I will now say, sorry, I wanted to add negation B to it here. So yeah, I have line 3 as negation N. So my addition, which is line 4, is negation N or negation B. Negation N or negation B. So don't forget that addition says that we have P, therefore P or Q. So this is my P, negation N, and I'm adding negation B to it using this particular disjunctive sign. So that's all I did in that place. So now, since I've already gotten negation N or negation B, then I cannot say let's say negation open parenthesis N and B close parenthesis. So I will say 4 D E, the Morgan's theorem. Don't forget that the Morgan's theorem tells us that if you have negation open bracket P and Q, you can say therefore, if and only if, you can replace it with if and only if negation P or negation Q. And like I said, that the way you can replace this particular one with this one is also the same way you can replace this particular one with this one. So what I did here is that I already have negation N or negation B, so I replace it with this one, which is negation N and B in parentheses. So that's what I did in this place. So then moving on now, line 6, I can say negation F 1 and 2 MP. Don't forget that the rule of MP states that P implies Q, P therefore Q. P, this is my P, from here to here is my P, implies Q, P therefore Q. So it's as easy as that. Then line 8, I cannot say negation F or B. So I'll say 7, addition. The rule of addition states that P therefore P or Q. So negation F, therefore negation F or B. So 7, addition. Then line 9, I cannot say F implies B. F implies B. So I will say 8, implication. The rule of implication says that P implies Q if and only if negation P or Q. So the same way you can replace P implies Q with negation P or Q is also the same way that you can replace negation P or Q with P implies Q. That's what the rule of replacement is stating. So here now, all I did was implication on this line. So I revert it from negation P or Q. I bring it back to P implies Q. Then line 10, I cannot say E. So that's 9. That's line 2 and line 9. 2 and 9 MP. So modus ponens, I just use modus ponens for line 2 and line 9 to get this line 10. So I've already arrived at the conclusion. I've answered the question. So don't forget that in rule of replacement, all you are just doing is just like also rule of inference. And when you are applying the rule of replacements, you also bear the rule of inference in mind. As you can see, I'm using both rule of replacement and also rule of inference. Addition is a rule of inference, while De Morgan is rule of replacement. Modus ponens is rule of inference. Addition is rule of inference. Implication is rule of replacement. Modus ponens is also rule of inference. So when you are applying rule of rule of replacement, you are making use of all the 19 rules. So you have to have all the 19 rules at the back of your mind. So let's quickly solve one more example before we move on to our next topic, which is the rule of inconsistency. So let's say we have something like line 1. I or J and negation K. Those parentheses. Line 2. I or J, this parenthesis implies L or negation K. Then our conclusion is K implies L. So like I said, I just want to be applying all the 19 rules until I get to K implies L. And then I can say that's what I've answered the question. So the first thing that we'll do here is number 3, line 3. Distribution on number 1, I or J, and I or negation K. So I say 1 distribution. Then line 4, I or J. 3 simplification. Then line 5, L or negation K. That's 2 and 4 MP. Then I cannot say 6 negation K or L commutation. 5 commutation. Don't forget that the rule of commutation says if you have P implies Q, you can replace it, that is if and only if Q implies P. And also if you have P, commutation states that if you have P and Q, you can say therefore Q, if and only if Q and P. And if you also have P or Q, we can say if and only if, replacing it with Q or P. So the rule of commutation is saying that if you have P and Q, you can replace it with Q and P. And if you also have P or Q, you can replace it with Q or P. So here I have L or negation L or negation K. So I replaced it with negation K or L. So 5 commutation. Then I will now say line 7, K implies L. So that's 6 implication. So if you check the rule of implication very well, the rule of implication is telling us that what if you have P implies Q, you can say if and only if negation P or Q. Like I said, you can replace this with this and also replace this with this. So since I already have this, I replace this with this. So that's why I said 6 implication, and it takes me to the conclusion. So don't forget that just like rule of inference, once we get to the conclusion, we are going to stop. So ladies and gentlemen, from here we are going to be moving on to the next topic, which is the rule of inconsistency. Thank you. Alright, so the last rule that we'll be talking about is the rule of inconsistency. And there's nothing special about inconsistency either as a topic or as a rule or under symbolic logic. What it's just telling us is that the variables are inconsistent. That is, there's a variable in the conclusion that is not in the premise. In other words, two different rules are very, very important in inconsistency. Number one, addition, and number two, disjunctive syllogism, because it is addition that we use in bringing the variable that is in the conclusion into the premise. The variable is not in the premise, but it is inside the conclusion. That is why it is inconsistent. That is, the variables are inconsistent. So at the end of the day, whatever it is that we are doing, we are using addition to bring in the variable that is not in the premise but in the conclusion. Then we are going to be using the rule of disjunctive syllogism to arrive at the conclusion. So let me just give us an example of such arguments, then we can see what I'm trying to explain generally. So now let's say line 1, we have something like A implies B. Then line 2, we have negation A implies C. Line 3, we have negation open parenthesis B or C close parenthesis. Then our conclusion is D. As you can see, the conclusion D is not in the premise, so the variables are inconsistent. So what I'm trying to explain is that at the end of the day, we are going to be using addition to bring this D inside this premise. So we can say line 4, let me say negation B and negation C, 3, D, E, the Morgan's theorem. Then line 5, negation B, 4, simplification. Then line 6, negation A, that's 1 and 5, empty. Then line 7, C, 2 and 6, NP. Then 8, C or D. That is, I'm using addition to bring in this variable that is lacking. So I'll say 7, addition. Then number 9, negation C and negation B, 4, commutation. Then 10, negation C, that's 9, simplification. Then 11, D. So I've arrived at the conclusion at line 11, D. Through 8 and 10, disjunctive syllogism. So as I was explaining earlier, that the rule of disjunctism and addition is very important, because at the end of the day, you are going to use the addition to bring in the variable that is not in the premise. Then you are going to use disjunctive syllogism to arrive at the conclusion, which is D. Let me give you an hint. You might probably be asking me that how are you going to know what you are doing, or how are you going to know when to bring the D in and when not to bring the D in? Okay, fine. The thing is, as long as this is just like a clue, as long as we've actually seen two different lines that have contradiction. Let's say we have something like C to stand on a line, that is line 7, I have C already, and then line 10 I have negation C. So all I'm just looking for is to ensure that I have contradiction in the argument. So as long as I have C and I have negation C, I'm just going to use the rule of addition to add D to this C. Then it's going to serve as my first line of disjunctive syllogism. Then the negation C is going to serve as my second line of disjunctive syllogism. Then I'll arrive at my conclusion. So simple. So C, then I have negation C. So I'm going to use the rule of addition to add D to that C. So that's going to stand as the first line of my disjunctive syllogism. Then the negation C is going to serve as the second line. Then I'll be able to deduce the conclusion, which is D. So as long as we have two different contradictions, that is A then negation A in another line. As long as we have the two of them in another line in that particular argument, then you'll be able to do the rule of inconsistency. So all you just have to do is to use addition to add the the conclusion to that line, to that particular variable. Then you use the negation as the second line of disjunctive syllogism. So that particular one that you added the conclusion to is going to stand as the first line of our disjunctive syllogism. So ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of our class on symbolic logic 1.